Yes, now everyone, welcome back to another video here on the domsballchat YouTube channel. Today, we've got the predictions back. It's not A-League predictions, we're almost there, but it's Oz Cup, it's just as good. And of course, before we get to the round of 32 of the Oz Cup, we have the playoffs with the four bottom finishing A-League teams. We have Perth Glory taking on Brisbane Roar, and then we also have Newcastle Jets taking on Western United. That's going to be the game that I'm going to be doing a live watch along for, so stay tuned to the channel. Announcement will be coming out later today, but without further ado, let's get into tonight's game, talk a little bit about what I expect out of these two teams, talk about, what I think is going to happen, and let's start it off with Perth Glory taking on Brisbane Roar. Okay, as I mentioned, Perth Glory taking on Brisbane Roar is going to be the first game of these two playoffs played up in Darwin. This is obviously going to be tonight's game, Tuesday night's game. Perth Glory, they've had a massive shake-up over the off-season, getting rid of Alan Stajic, controversial decision, bringing in David Zurulich, who I think is an excellent coach. Big reason why Sydney FC did so well last year, that high-pressing, attacking football. I think he's going to implement that at Perth. They've got the young players to do that as well. A lot of investment in the youth for this upcoming season. Obviously, the likes of Miliusnic, an experienced winger, Gamulka, a young, exciting midfielder. I know a lot of Brisbane fans were disappointed to see him go. You got Nathaniel Blair, who was absolutely ripping it up for Western Sydney Wanderers in the NPL at the start of the year. As a Wanderers supporter, I'm disappointed to see him go, but if he's seeing first team football over in Perth Glory, you can understand it. And they've also brought in, that bit of experience, pedigree as well. Brendan O'Neill, Josh Risdon, Pennington, who, may not be as experienced as the last two, but, after that season, last season at Wellington Phoenix, he's got a lot of experience behind him. I reckon he's going to do absolutely wonders over in Perth this season. But they've also lost a bit of talent. The likes of Daniel Benny, the likes of Stefan Kolokovsky. That's a lot of output that they're losing this season. Obviously, Benny going over to QPR. Hopefully, he sees a lot of game time this season over in the championship. But Kolokovsky, he still hasn't got a club that I'm aware of. So, very interesting to see where Kolokovsky ends up in the coming months. But keeping hold of Taggart, that's a massive positive for Perth coming into this season and this Oz Cup run. On to Brisbane Roar now, Ruben Zadkovic, head coach, they extended his contract after it was just an interim base, but they've extended it. He will be taking hold of this Brisbane Roar team now, hopefully giving them a bit of stability. Obviously, crazy amount of managers last season, 4 managers just over the one season, just absolutely insane. But they've had some big losses, for the start of the season anyway. Henry Hall, he's over in the J League at the moment. He will be returning in January, but for the first 6 months of this season, first 6 months of this season, Brisbane Roar without Henry Hall is going to be very interesting to see. Tom Waldred, he has departed for some more international football, gone over to India. Kai Truan gone to Melbourne City. I think that's a massive loss for Brisbane. Kai Truan was arguably one of their better players last year. And Marco Rojas going over to Wellington as well. Kind of inevitable that Marco Rojas was going to leave Brisbane, but still a massive, massive loss for Brisbane. But they've got some, interesting signings. Brisbane have really dipped their toes into signings you just wouldn't expect them to kind of pick up. You got the Walid Shaw, the Lebanese international. You got Hossein Bility, a young Australian defender. Ben Halloran, he's returning to Brisbane after a few seasons at Adelaide, a couple of stints in Adelaide. And Ferran Canis, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Apologies if that's wrong. The young American centre-back, which is going to be an interesting, see how he adapts to football over here. It's going to be very interesting. And obviously, keeping hold of Thomas Waddingham, I think, may be one of the biggest achievements for Brisbane so far this offseason. Obviously, we'd love to see him go overseas, do well, but keeping hold of him for Brisbane, I'm sure, is absolutely massive. And you can expect that fluid attacking football that Ruben Zadkovic started to implement towards the end of last season. almost saw them make finals. Inevitably, they ended up in 9th place. But it's going to be very interesting to see who comes out on top in this game. If I have to, I'm going to give a prediction. I'm just going to go with Brisbane Roar due to the stability they've had with Ruben Zadkovic. They've had the whole offseason with him. Drilic came in a bit later, and, it's a lot of young players. Obviously, I imagine both teams field a lot of young players in this playoff match. But maybe not. Maybe they want to go full strength and make it to the round of 32. So I'm going to go with Brisbane in this one. If I have to give a score prediction, I'm going to go with we'll go high score and we'll go 3-2 Brisbane win. And then the Wednesday night game, the game that I'm going to be doing a live watch along for, so stay tuned for details on that coming out later today. Western United taking on the Newcastle Jets. Very interesting one. Two teams that over the offseason looked to have gone a very young, youthful approach. Obviously, Newcastle did it a lot last season under Robbie Stanton, and it looks like John Aloisi and Western United putting a lot of faith in the youth after, they've had a pretty good NPL season so far, the Western United youth down in Victoria. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this season kind of shapes out for them, especially after a lot of big name losses. Lockie Wales, Daniel Pena, Josh Risdon, Stephen Lustica, a lot of big names and a lot of experience there for Western United as well. That's very key. Daniel Pena is going to be a massive loss, not only to Western United, but to the A-League in general. Absolutely amazing, entertaining player to watch. But, they've brought in a little bit of experience as well. They've brought up a lot of youth players, a lot of scholarship, and, small year deals handed out to these youth players. But Tate Russell, Ibisuki, they are some big experienced players. Hiroshi Ibisuki, I think, could be one of the signings of this offseason so far. He just, Adelaide would be absolutely kicking it. They've lost him, and they've lost him to Western United, who I think, he will be a good fit down at Western United, Ibisuki. So that's going to be very interesting to watch. Obviously, kept hold of the likes of Michael Roos, Matt Grimaldi, those young, exciting players for Western United that, started to prove themselves the last season. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they go, and it does look like they're going to do looking to the youth to provide that attacking flair through this, upcoming season and hopefully an upcoming Oz Cup run for them as well. But their opponents, Newcastle, we know what they're about. We know what Rob Stanton's about. A lot of youth-focused football, because they've lost a lot of players over this off-season. Stamatolopoulos, Moragas, Bahaja, Goodwin, Piscopo, O'Neill. That's some big-name losses for Newcastle Jets. But they've brought in, some good youth players from, even other A-League teams. Eli Adams. You've got the two from Sydney FC. I'm losing one of their names, but Oscar Fryer, although I'm hearing that he could be out for the whole first season with an ACL done in training. So that's disappointing for both Oscar and Newcastle Jets. But, they brought in a bit of experience as well. Lockie Rose, Alexander Shushner. There's some experienced players that could add a lot of value to this team. Lockie Rose is a very interesting one. Probably didn't have the best of last seasons. Obviously, Germain took the number one striker spot at MacArthur. Going to be very interesting to see how Lockie Rose goes into these teams as well. Obviously, they probably picked him up because they knew they were losing Stammer. So, hopefully Lockie Rose can find his form like Stammer did in Newcastle last year as well. More youth-focused football. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how these young Newcastle players play in this Oz Cup match. You'd imagine a very young squad from Robbie Stanton as well. And for a prediction, I'm actually going to go with Newcastle Jets. Probably just that, last season with a lot of their youth players playing a lot of football. Unlike Western, where towards the end of the season, they probably slowly played a bit more football. But they've brought up a lot of young players from the NPL side. So who knows? I'm going to go with Newcastle Jets, and I'm going to go with a 2-1 win for Newcastle in this one. There we have it. There are my predictions for who's going through in these Australia Cup playoffs. I've got Brisbane Roar, and I've got Newcastle Jets going through in these playoffs. So if you have enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel. We've got a lot more Australia Cup content coming over the next few weeks and months. Obviously, we're going to do all throughout this Australia Cup, so stay tuned to the channel. Leave a comment. I want to know who you think is going through in these playoff games as well, and don't forget to tune in to the live watch along on Wednesday night for the Newcastle Jets versus Western United game as well. So if you have enjoyed, make sure you like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you very soon.